Your brain makes over 35,000 decisions a day. And here's the unsettling part. The vast majority of those decisions aren't really yours. They're shaped by invisible psychological triggers embedded in everyday conversations, body language, and social pressure. The people who understand these triggers don't just participate in conversations. They control them. So let's get something straight before we go any further. This is not about manipulation. This is not about turning people into puppets. What this is about is understanding the hidden mechanics of human interaction, the ones operating underneath every conversation you've ever had. Every negotiation, every argument, every first impression. These mechanics are rooted in decades of psychological and physiological research. From university labs to FBI crisis negotiation units. They exist whether you learn them or not. The only question is whether you'll be the one who understands them or the one who keeps getting caught off guard. And that's really the core tension here. Most people go through life reacting. Reacting to what others say, reacting to pressure, reacting to emotions they don't fully understand. But there's a small percentage of people who have learned to respond instead of react. And the difference between reacting and responding is everything. That's what this video is really about, shifting from someone who is moved by every room they walk into, to someone who understands the room before a single word is spoken. Let's start with the first principle. And it's the one most people underestimate because it involves doing absolutely nothing. Silence, strategic, intentional silence. Most people are terrified of it. When a pause stretches too long in a conversation, the average person rushes to fill it. They over-explain, they backtrack, they give away information they didn't intend to share. And there's a physiological reason for this. Research in social neuroscience has shown that prolonged silence in a social setting activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that processes social rejection and discomfort. Your brain literally interprets silence as a form of social threat. It panics. It pushes you to speak, to resolve the tension, to restore connection. Now here's where it gets interesting. The person who stays silent during that pause, the person who holds the space without flinching, is perceived as more powerful. Negotiators have understood this for decades. Chris Voss, the former lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI, has spoken extensively about the power of tactical silence. In high-stakes hostage situations, Voss and his team would often say less, not more. Because silence creates a vacuum, and the human brain is desperate to fill vacuums. So when you're in a conversation, a difficult one at work, a negotiation over salary, even a personal disagreement, and you make your point and then simply stop talking, something shifts. The other person feels compelled to respond. They often concede ground they didn't plan to. Not because you pressured them, but because their own brain pressured them. That's the first trick, and it costs you nothing, just the discipline to stay quiet one beat longer than feels comfortable. Now the second principle takes a completely different approach. Instead of doing nothing, it's about doing exactly what the other person does. It's called mirroring, and it has deep roots in neuroscience. In the early 1990s, a team of Italian researchers led by Giacomo Rizzolatti at the University of Parma made a discovery that changed our understanding of social connection. They found a class of brain cells now known as mirror neurons. These neurons fire not only when you perform an action, but when you observe someone else performing the same action. They're the reason you wince when you see someone stub their toe. They're the reason yawning is contagious, and they're the foundation of human empathy. Mirroring as a psychological tool means subtly reflecting another person's body language, tone of voice, or even their words back to them. When done naturally, not like a robotic copycat, it creates an unconscious sense of rapport. The other person's brain registers you as familiar, as safe, as someone who understands them. Studies published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology have shown that people who are mirrored in conversation rate the other person as more likable and more trustworthy, even when they can't consciously identify what created that feeling. Here's the practical layer. If you're in a meeting and the person across from you leans forward and speaks slowly, you lean forward slightly and match their tempo. If they cross their arms and use short sentences, you don't burst in with wide gestures and rapid speech. You match their energy first, then once rapport is built, you can begin to lead. You shift your posture, and because of the connection you've established, they often follow you without realizing it. This is called pacing and leading, and it's one of the oldest tools in both clinical psychology and persuasion science. The third principle might be the most counterintuitive one on this list. It's called the Benjamin Franklin effect, and it flips everything you think you know about likability upside down. Most people believe that if you want someone to like you, you should do something nice for them. But Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, discovered the opposite. In his autobiography, Franklin described a situation where a rival legislator consistently opposed him. Instead of trying to win the man over with favors, Franklin asked him for a favor specifically, to borrow a rare book from the man's personal library. The legislator agreed, and after that small act of generosity, his attitude toward Franklin changed dramatically. They became lifelong allies. Psychologists later confirmed this phenomenon through the lens of cognitive dissonance theory. Originally proposed by Leon Festinger in 1957. The idea is simple but powerful. When someone does you a favor, their brain needs to justify the action. The easiest justification is, I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I help them? So the act of helping you literally rewires their perception of you. They don't help you because they like you. They start liking you because they helped you. In everyday life, this means that asking someone for small, reasonable favors, borrowing a pen, asking for a recommendation, requesting advice, can actually build connection faster than offering favors yourself. It's deeply counterintuitive, but it's backed by decades of experimental research. Now, the fourth principle moves from words and actions into something far more primal. Eye contact. Most people don't realize how much information is transmitted through the eyes alone. Research conducted at the University of Aberdeen found that people rate faces with direct eye contact as more attractive and more trustworthy than those with averted gaze. Separate studies have shown that sustained eye contact triggers the release of oxytocin, the same hormone released during bonding between a mother and a newborn child. But eye contact also communicates dominance. In virtually every primate species, including humans, the individual who holds eye contact longer is perceived as higher status. Here's where this becomes practical. In social and professional situations, most people either avoid eye contact out of anxiety or use it aggressively without awareness. The sweet spot, the one used by skilled communicators, is steady. Warm eye contact held for about 60 to 70% of a conversation. When you're listening, you hold eye contact a bit more. When you're speaking, you can break it naturally. This pattern signals both confidence and approachability. There's a well-known technique, sometimes called the triangle method, where you shift your gaze slowly between the other person's left eye, right eye, and mouth. It creates a feeling of intimacy without intensity. Professionals in sales, leadership, and even therapy use this almost instinctively. The fifth principle is one that's been tested in formal academic experiments more than almost any other persuasion tool. It's called the door-in-the-face technique. Robert Cialdini, the social psychologist whose research on influence has shaped modern understanding of persuasion, documented this extensively. The technique works like this. You start by making a large request, one you fully expect the other person to decline. Then, after they say no, you follow up with a smaller, more reasonable request. The second request is what you actually wanted all along. The reason this works is a principle called reciprocal concession. When you scale down your request, the other person's brain perceives it as a concession, as if you've given something up. And human psychology is wired for reciprocity. When someone gives ground, we feel an internal pressure to give ground in return. So the person agrees to the smaller request at a much higher rate than they would have if you just asked for it outright. Cialdini's research, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, showed this effect across multiple settings: fundraising, volunteer work, negotiations, and everyday social exchanges. It's not trickery, it's the architecture of human social exchange. We are wired to return favors, match concessions, and maintain a sense of fairness, even when we are not consciously aware of it. And that brings us to the sixth and final principle. This one comes directly from the world of high-stakes crisis negotiation. And it might be the most powerful tool in this entire list. It's called emotional labeling. Matthew Lieberman, a neuroscientist at UCLA, conducted a landmark study using brain imaging technology. He found that when people were shown images designed to trigger fear or anger, their amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, lit up intensely. But when those same people were asked to name the emotion they were feeling, to simply say, "I feel anxious" or "I feel frustrated," something remarkable happened. Activity in the amygdala decreased. The simple act of labeling the emotion engaged the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of the brain, and calmed the emotional response. Chris Voss took this research and turned it into one of the most effective negotiation tools in the FBI's arsenal. In hostage situations, Voss trained negotiators to say things like, "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed," or "It seems like you're frustrated." They weren't asking questions. They were labeling emotions, and the effect was immediate. The person on the other end would often pause, take a breath, and say, "Yeah, that's exactly how I feel," and in that moment, the emotional temperature dropped. Rational conversation became possible. Resolutions became reachable. You can use this in any conversation. When someone is upset, a partner, a colleague, a friend, instead of defending yourself or trying to fix the problem immediately, simply name what they're feeling. "It sounds like this really hurt you. It seems like you're carrying a lot right now." You're not agreeing or disagreeing. You're acknowledging, and acknowledgement is one of the deepest human needs. Now here's where I want you to really sit with something. You've just learned 6 principles that, on the surface, look like tools for control. And they are, but the deeper truth is this: every one of these principles works because of something profoundly human. Silence works because we crave connection. Mirroring works because we long to be understood. The Franklin effect works because helping others changes how we see them. Eye contact works because we need to be seen. The door in the face works because fairness matters to us. Emotional labeling works because being heard is one of the most healing things a human being can experience. These aren't weapons, they're mirrors. They reflect back what we all want: to be respected, to be understood, to feel like we matter in the room we're standing in. The people who misuse these tools eventually lose something far more valuable than any negotiation. They lose trust. And once trust is gone, no technique in the world can get it back. So here's the real question this video leaves you with. Now that you understand how these invisible forces shape every interaction you have, what will you do with that understanding? Will you use it to take from people, or will you use it to connect with them in a way that most people never learn how to? Because the darkest thing about psychology isn't that people can be influenced. It's that most people never realize they already are every single day. The only difference now is that you see it.